Save the Semantics, episode 243. It is January 15th, 2024. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Recording this on a Monday. Today is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and it is a holiday for myself. I have the day off, which is nice. Give myself a bit of a nice long weekend once again, which I didn't really expect going into last week, so this was a nice little surprise when I found out earlier, like on Tuesday or Wednesday, that I had today off. So it's nice. Take advantage of it. Just kind of relax. I don't really have any big plans for today, but really just wanted to kind of I just wanted to be low-key, be not be too I've had a nice weekend. I was actually pretty active this weekend. I kind of went on a small trip, enjoyed time out, hanging out with a friend. It was a good time, and so that was that took up quite a bit of my energy, and so these last couple of days I've just been really chilling and relaxing and stuff. So going on some walks here and there. Might go to the gym later. We'll see how I feel. I probably should. I've been really inconsistent with kind of my workouts recently. Inconsistent in the sense that I don't really I haven't set up my schedule to where it's like I run and then I gym and then gym and run. Like, it's just kind of been all over the place. Like, I've just sort of done what I felt like doing, which has been, I felt okay, but I think having a bit of a better, more stringent routine might be useful as well. We'll see going into the rest of this month as I kind of pick up with work. So yeah, we'll see about that and how much energy I can kind of provide by going to, by working out and all that kind of thing. So anyways, just want to enjoy the rest of this kind of weekend before going into this upcoming week with kind of a, bit more of a determination, if you will. Really wanting to try to get some stuff done, stay on top of things so I don't fall back or fall behind on stuff, So yeah, that's kind of my, that's sort of my mentality going into this upcoming week. I think I've been sort of like distracted, I feel, and I guess it's kind of hard. I know it's already sort of like 2 weeks into the year, but I'm still sort of in holiday kind of mindset, like New Year's really hasn't felt that long ago, even though it has already been, like I said, 2 weeks, but I'm still sort of in that mindset of thinking this is sort of like a holiday. And I know technically today is a holiday, but it's not really, it's not the same as like Christmas holiday or New Year's holiday or anything like that. So I'm still adjusting back to having like a full week of work, full week. It's gonna be a rough transition for sure, getting back into it. But I think I just have to sort of take it piece by piece and not be too hard on myself when when I'm not quote unquote performing at the level that I necessarily want to. But yeah, I just I'm still adjusting, I suppose, getting back into more of a heavy work schedule. Anyways, wanted to record today. I'm gonna try my best to record something this weekend as well. It's been a little while since I've recorded like 2 parts. Well, I guess I did it a little while back, but last time I recorded, it was just for I just recorded for one session, but I wanted to do 2 this time around for this week, just because I kind of found the time to record today, and might want to do something later this week as well to kind of catch up on some things, because who knows what might happen. Let's talk some sports. So in terms of, I'll just kind of give a brief update on kind of the Warriors front. Nothing's really changed in terms of roster, trades, or anything like that. They pulled off a victory against the Bulls on, was it Friday? Yeah, Friday, which was good and very much needed. And then, they lost to the Bucks on a back-to-back, which is fine. It seems like they put up a pretty good effort without Curry. This doesn't really change the overall trajectory of anything. I still think that, it's literally we just got one victory. It just doesn't really change the trajectory of this season, to be honest. With just that one, maybe a little pick-me-up win, I still feel that it's, there's still many changes that will need to be made with the roster, getting off of some of those contracts, especially like Wiggins and that sort of thing. So I believe they're playing later tonight, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check on my end. It's been let's see. Yeah, so they're playing today against the Grizzlies. They should win that, because the Grizzlies literally have nobody on their roster at the moment, which is crazy. They've had some of the worst injury luck that I've ever seen with, like, a team, aside from maybe the Pelicans. But, like, the Pelicans, like, in last year, they lost, like, Brandon Ingram and, like, Zion and, McCollum and kind of their main core players, which sort of led them to sort of fall in the standings when they had the number 1 seed last year. But this Grizzlies one is really rough, man. Like, I'm not a fan of the Grizzlies. I've been very critical of them and, Jaw's, like, antics, and I think it didn't help when they had Dillon Brooks on their team, and just the shit that he pulled during his play. Obviously his his injury against GP2 was huge. Like, that was a really big kind of turning point kind of in that series. So I don't know. It's been difficult for me to sympathize with that team and really find a whole lot to, I guess, appreciate about them, as talented as Ja is and everything like that. But they've been just incredibly unlucky this year. It's actually unbelievable. Like, I feel like that team right now is just cursed. Like, it is just injury after injury after injury for, role player, Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, obviously Steven Adams, and then Ja out. Like, it's just been a complete train wreck. So I feel for Memphis fans. I think that it's just been a very unfortunate season for them. And I don't want to see that for any team, regardless of how much dislike there is or how much animosity there has been. I think seeing that really sucks. I've probably said this before, but injuries are probably the worst thing to happen in any sports ever. Like, it is so, because it can happen to literally anyone, and it can completely derail your career whether you want it to or not. Like, it could just be a completely incidental thing. It's not, it might not be necessarily even caused by a certain player, but it just happens, and it's like, oh, how come this player turned out to not be good? Oh, it's because he got injured. It's like 90% of the time when the expected, or when a player doesn't perform to the level of their expectation, like say coming out of the draft, it's because of an injury. Like Greg Oden, you could even throw Zion on there. Like, even though he has performed to a certain level, and he has sort of proven himself to be an all-star and everything like that, but still, like, injuries have derailed these players' careers to an extent, like, and teams' success. Like, it is all, it's very, that's kind of where, that's just sort of the thing with sports, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that it's such a huge part of sports, and the fact that people can get hurt, and it just completely ruins a team's chances for playoff success or championship success, for that matter. It really sucks. So yeah, I hate seeing that to any team, regardless of whatever history there has been with my own, team. But it just sucks. So, excuse me. Hopefully they can turn around next year, and because there's still a potential for that team to be very, very, very much a potential contender, up and coming contender. But they've just been, they've just had the worst luck this year. So, very unfortunate to see. You hate seeing that happen to anyone. Speaking of injuries, actually, not really, but I want to talk briefly about the NFL and the NFL playoffs, which is really funny because I'm not at all like a football fan by any means. I'm very, like, I consider myself a casual NBA fan. Like, NFL, I'm not even like, I'm so far beyond. Like, I'm such a, fair weather fan. Like, it is like ridiculous. But I haven't watched fully, but I've caught parts of playoff games, if you will. So I am aware of the Detroit Lions and their lack of playoff success. I am very much aware of that. I am aware of the fact that they have been clowned on in the past. I do remember when they went 0-16 back in like 2008, was it 2008, 2009? I remember that. I remember that being all over like ESPN and shit back when I used to watch ESPN more on just kind of like a regular basis. That was very clear in my head, and they've always just been like clowned on as being this kind of poverty franchise. And so I think it's really awesome to see that they finally got their first playoff win in like over 30 years. I think I always I generally like to root for kind of the underdog team or the underdog franchise, the ones that are that haven't had much success recently or in the past. I can only imagine how it feels for those fans who haven't really had a taste of playoff success at all. There's like an 89-year-old season ticket holder who's witnessing his first like playoff victory as a fan in 32 years, which is crazy. I have a sense of what it's like as a Warriors fan, kind of, but even then it's like it's not comparable. It is not really comparable because it is almost a lifetime of not seeing your team perform at the highest level. You know what I mean? And that's very difficult that's very difficult for me to imagine. You know what I mean? So I think I was kind of like going through sort of the reactions from Detroit fans and just this sense of relief and this sort of just incredible, just overwhelming sense of just, I don't know. Yeah, just kind of this weight off of their shoulders, and the potential for them to experience even more joy going forward into these playoffs. Like it just must be such an incredible feeling. And so I was sort of like reading up on kind of the reactions and listening to some of the things that fans had to say, and I think it's awesome to see. It's really cool to see kind of these in the sports world. It's incredible to see kind of these stories about I don't know, just these underdog teams that haven't had that just haven't experienced this type of thing in a very long time. So really cool. Congratulations to the Lions and to the Lions fans and Detroit fans. That's got to be really dope. Hopefully that offsets the disaster that is the Pistons right now. Hopefully that really just offsets it, like, because it's just on the completely other side of the scale. I'm sure that, like, if there are any Detroit fans that are fans of both the Lions and the Pistons that are like, you know what, screw the Pistons, let's just ride out what we have with our NFL team, because this is much more important to us right now. So, but yeah, I think in a similar vein, it's sort of funny, kind of going back to the NBA a little bit. I was also reading up last year and kind of following along with the Sacramento Kings success. And I know that, like, I don't even know if necessarily we can consider them rivals as Warriors fans. There's been a little bit of a rivalry going with us, with, like, the playoff series last year and everything like that. But that's sort of a similar kind of case where the Kings haven't had a playoff series and over whatever, like 15 years or something crazy like that. It's not the same, right? It's not the same amount of time as like the Detroit Lions, but still a very different, it's kind of in a similar vein. I was just following along with that. I can kind of compare the level of excitement that fans felt for having some level of playoff experience for the first time, and just what a feeling that is. I think sports is it's really like funny and interesting thinking about sports and how much they mean to people and how much supporting a team means to people, you know what I mean? And just how much of yourself you sort of put into a team. And like there is such it's hard to kind of find anywhere else or in like kind of any other realm this really like collective support and collective community in a sense, outside of sports. Like you could point to like politics and stuff, but just how screwed up the rhetoric is with politics. It's difficult to find something to like latch onto in my opinion, just based on kind of what I've seen with discourse, with like online discourse and everything like that, and trying to conjure up support in order to bring about change through a political sphere, and trying to essentially build support for something. I feel it's a little different than sports, because with sports the one and only purpose for like you to sort of support the team is for them to win, right? Like that is like the central goal, and everybody is sort of like comes together for that purpose, right? With politics, it's like, yes, you are supporting a candidate, like if you are, campaigning, or you're donating, or you're voting, or whatever, you are, supporting this candidate in order for them to win a position, a political position, in office. But it's more than that as well, right? It's like you are voting for them in order to represent you, in kind of the the lens of the American kind of political system, and for them to enact, for the hope for them to enact laws, and enact certain legislation to then hopefully benefit us as the people, right? Like there are more steps, there are more tiers. It's like the first step is to get them elected, the next step is to hope for them to be able to pass certain legislation, but then you have to consider like the other people like in Congress that are going to block this thing. Like it's just like it's much more layers than just the want to get them to win an office position. With sports, it is literally just for your team to win. Like that's just kind of what it is, right? And for them to support, like that is just like the ultimate goal. So it is much more simple. It's way more straightforward, right? In terms of like the main goal, the focus for you rooting for a team, right? Obviously, like you can factor in a lot of other narratives in regards to individual players and whatnot. Like of course there's much more nuance in that regard, but the main, like the bottom line is for your team to win everything, right? So yeah, I don't know, it's just really funny. I don't know, it's funny if you think about it too much. Like obviously it's not that complicated, like but it is like fascinating to see how much it means for people, for fans, when a team is successful. And it's just like you're like it is kind of like, if you step back, it's like, why this is almost meaningless sort of in the grand scale, in the grand scheme of things. Like you're celebrating entertainment. Like these players and these people, they will likely never know who you are as an individual, but it is just the collective essence of the fans and the city, or whatever kind of community, if you want to call it that come together to support a single thing, that you could also say it doesn't even really benefit you, except purely on like an emotional level, right? At least that's kind of how I feel about it. If you sort of look at it, right? Like the benefit you get from your team winning is much more. It is more on an emotional, like spiritual level, more than like anything else, right? Like, do you monetarily benefit from your team winning, unless you're like betting and shit? I don't want to get into betting, and I don't want to talk about that. Like I've already ranted about that a little while back. Maybe I'll do another one. But if you want looking at it from that kind of cynical lens, like you're benefiting from your team winning on an emotional sense, because you're like, okay, they succeeded. I put myself into this team, and I'm happy that they were able to win. Like that's just kind of what it comes down to. I don't know. What was the point of this whole spiel? I don't know. I just like seeing those kinds of success stories, and I'm not, again, I'm not an NFL fan really at all. I'm very very casual, and I'll tune in once in a while. It seems like the Niners are doing pretty well this year, so guess I'm a bandwagon fan a little bit. But I'm not like, even if like the Niners lose or whatever, I'm not going to be super devastated. Like it is what it is. Like it would be cool to see if like another team, one of these teams that have never won a championship or haven't won a championship in a very long time, like the Lions, somehow pull it off, that might be very exciting to see. So there's a lot of different things. There's also an upset yesterday too, I guess, with the Packers and the Cowboys. I guess the Cowboys were way more heavily favored to win, and they got blown out. So that's always fun, if you're not a fan of the team getting upset. So yeah, I don't know. It's I'm like tuning in a little bit here and there. So it seems like there's some exciting stuff happening on that front. And then we're getting closer and closer to the Super Bowl, which is always around my birthday. Again, I don't really care too much about it, but it might be exciting, man. So I'll be tuning in. I'll be tuning in to see how that goes. Anyways, man, I've been talking way more about football than I even expected, but let's talk about Beef, the TV show. Before that, let me take a break, and I'm gonna take a sip of this chai latte that I got. Just give me just a sec. Okay. So I finished up Beef this weekend. It's kind of funny. It's sort of like coincided a little bit with the show getting a lot of recognition by the Golden Globes, and I didn't even really realize. Actually, well, maybe I had sort of overheard that the show had been nominated or whatever, but it is really funny how I started watching it right as award season started to pick up, and then Steven Yeun and Ali Wong both got nominated, along with I think the series itself won, right, for limited series, which is really cool. But really good show, really thought-provoking, and just good stuff, man. The balance between comedy and sort of drama, it does it very well. The acting is all phenomenal across the board, and this is another piece of media, recent media with a predominantly Asian American cast, with Asian American writers and kind of people at the forefront, that has gotten a lot of awards buzz and awards in general, and I think that's it's really cool to see. I think that's this show and Everything Everywhere All at Once feels like they can be really good sort of complementary pieces, or you could kind of watch them as sort of this collective Asian American media that sort of showcase Asians who live in the US, how they sort of deal with their identity, and how they sort of their struggle to, I guess, assimilate, the struggle to find meaning, and this kind of and depression and mental health and stuff like that. And I think both of the film and the show do a very good job at kind of depicting that, and kind of how I felt about Everything Everywhere. I feel similarly about this show as well. I think they approach the ideas of just this sense of being uncomfortable in, the current position as someone who is an immigrant, or a child of an immigrant. I think obviously I think everything everywhere all at once, kind of sort of like hyper, what was it? What's the term? It creates this kind of like fantastical concept of, of the struggles, and, just kind of it creates this sort of ridiculous scenario, and much more, I guess, not as less grounded in reality. I mean, Beef itself is pretty crazy and ludicrous as well, but you know what I mean. It is much more fantastical, and sort of the magical elements of it, this sort of escapist kind of fantasy that it creates, provides commentary of, the main character wanting to essentially, kind of escape from their current position, and imagining these different scenarios that she could have taken, the different steps along in her life where it could have led to, her being maybe happier, being more content. But, the ultimate kind of, or, one of the messages in that film is just sort of acceptance, I think, is a big one. Finding joy in the little things, and just sort of doing the best that you can with the things that you have, not necessarily being complacent, but understanding that you have sort of the ability to and the awareness to make things better and be kinder to yourself, being kinder to others around you, and just continuing to sort of deepen relationships with one another. I think there's a lot of really nice. I think that movie is a lot more like wholesome than Beef, but there's a lot of messages that you can kind of like bring across from each of these. I think with Beef, it is much more. It's a lot darker for sure. But the overall message at the end of this show, and I'm sure there's a lot of other messages that you can kind of take away from it, is how, despite whatever trauma, despite whatever expectations that have been placed on you as someone who is like a, immigrant's child, despite all that, despite kind of the difficulty it is of, trying to kind of belong in a place where you feel you aren't fully connected to, like, you have to take responsibility for your actions. You have to take responsibility of who you are. There's a scene, or rather there's like one of the episodes kind of focuses on the upbringings of both Steven Yeun's and Ali Wong's characters, Danny and Amy's characters, and kind of the relationships that they have with their parents. Both, I think Danny's focuses more on the expectations that his parents place on him growing up, and him being the responsible older brother, and wanting him to sort of like continue on and take care of the family essentially, and essentially fall in line with the expectations of Korean parents, or kind of Asian parents, of wanting to continue to put themselves, just sort of keep things within the family and continue to kind of build on that, as opposed to having a sense of independence for themselves, right? Amy's character and her sort of relationship with her parents is one, like, she completely sort of removes herself from, from the lives of her parents, and she goes and does sort of her own thing, and she has very little contact with her parents at sort of, throughout the, but she does like go back and kind of like talk to her mom, and they have a conversation, but up until that point they hadn't like talked for like 2 years or something like that. It was less expectation for her from her parents, but more rather like she was kind of like carrying this burden, this kind of trauma of like infidelity, if you want to call it that her dad like cheated on her mom, and this sense of like she didn't feel like there was this open connection, or rather this open communication within her parents. So she kind of carried that with her, right? And it's very apparent if you kind of look back, and now that I'm kind of thinking back on it, like this sort of lack of communication carried forward in her relationship with George, her husband, with June, her daughter. Like she just puts up so many layers between herself and her loved ones, kind of in a similar sense with how her parents didn't discuss things with her, and weren't willing to discuss things with her. So I think that is sort of like her, I guess, what she was carrying, right? Danny much more so expectations of like wanting to continue forward, like, Korean traditions and customs, and then Amy much more her lack of, or her inability to communicate openly with her loved ones and close ones. And I think that the show just does a very good job of just, it's like despite all of the things that you may have incurred from your parents or from those that raised you, you still have the agency and the responsibility to carry yourself kind of accordingly, and to not put that on other people, right? Like with Amy, she was there's like the scene in like the therapist where she's like worried about essentially passing on these traumatic kind of elements of herself onto her child, June. Like there's just this sense of worry that she constantly has, and like she distances herself from June, right? Like George is the one who raises her, essentially, right? Who raises June, and there's only like a few moments where you see Amy connect with her daughter, and it's kind of just like, I don't want to say it's superficial, but it's just not as like it's different, right? Because she's always like distant, like it's always George. George is the one that's like taking care of June and is spending time with June. Like there's very little scenes where like Amy is like one-on-one with June. And so it's like, if you want to not pass on these things, it's like you have to be just like, you have to kind of be just like a better parent. You have to be like, it's kind of like this, like it's kind of funny. There's like a scene where the therapist is like, tells Amy, it's like, you're so self-aware, it's such a good thing, but it's like, you can be self-aware, but you're still not acting on those actions, and you're not taking the right steps to remedy those things. Like, you can be aware of your flaws, but if you aren't going to do anything about it, like, what's the point? You know what I mean? And that's something that I myself sometimes struggle with in terms of like, you know, understanding the issues that I have, but not like, not acting on it. Just kind of like letting those things sit with me for a while. Like expressing them, and maybe like, again, being aware of those things, but not like stepping forward and like, again, taking responsibility. Like it just, and it does take work to do that, for sure. Like, it is much easier said than done. Like, there's only so much talking that you can kind of do. I think there are some, like, the show does a very good job of, like, it does a really good job of, like, showing that therapy is very important for a person's growth, and it is important for them to, it's a very important tool to use if you are struggling with some things. But like, I think there is also the case where it's like you can kind of talk around the issue. I think the most obvious kind of example of this was the scene with George and Amy where they kind of do couples therapy, and Amy is just like she's very, like, it seems like she's very open and self-aware, but she is still kind of masking herself, or she's sort of like putting up barriers to really reveal her vulnerabilities. Like, she is not fully transparent about how she really feels, right? And that's pretty obvious. If it's very obvious, as as they kind of show in that scene and throughout, like, the episode and whatnot. So it's like, and then there's that quote towards the end of the show in the last episode where, like, Danny says, like, Western therapy doesn't work on Eastern minds, which I think is really funny. And it isn't to say that there isn't, like, you could argue that there's a lot of different ways to approach mental health, and it's not just like, like you could say, like, typical, like, Western therapy is not, like, quote unquote the only answer or the only solution. I am sure there are more ways to deal with mental health, depression, whatever, than just talk therapy. I think that it is more of the case where it's like that type of therapy didn't work for Amy necessarily because she was unwilling to acknowledge the issues that she had, right? Like, there is the one-on-one session that she has with the therapist where she sort of opens up, but there's still, like, she still has so many layers of barriers in between her and her ability to, like, fully talk about these things. Like, she doesn't talk about her own infidelity. She doesn't talk about her, like, she touches upon the fact that she doesn't want to bring down trauma on, pass on, quote unquote, pass on the trauma to her daughter. But there's just still so many other things that she doesn't really acknowledge and she doesn't really accept, right? And I think that's more of a fault on her rather than the fact that the therapy didn't necessarily work, right? It's because more of her, she didn't, like, go all the way, I guess you could say. At least that's sort of my kind of perception of things. And of course, like, it is, I think, sort of going back to it, talk therapy is not like a, save all. It's not like a catch all. It's not going to solve everything, right? It's not going to be the thing that will save you as a person. It's not going to be the thing that cures you of all of your issues. Like, I think there's good, like, there's good bits of criticism that this show provides in that regard, right? And I think that's, like, good. I think there's been a lot of it, kind of speaking on the front of, like, therapy and stuff, like, I think therapy is good for sure. It is very beneficial to be able to openly talk about like, things that you normally can't in, typical settings, or with, like, friends or with families, because it is sometimes you can't just broach that topic easily, right? So it's good to have a third party to be able to talk about these things. But I also think that it's not the only thing that is going to help you, right? Like, that you can talk all you want, but at a certain point, like, you yourself need to start taking actions of trying to better yourself, right? Outside of, just, talking about it. I think that's, like, probably, like, a really good first step. But I think that there is, like, especially, like, an online discourse, kind of what I've seen is, like, oh, this person needs therapy. Everybody needs therapy. It's like, okay, well, maybe let's, like, I don't know, let's take a step back a little bit. I think therapy can potentially benefit the majority of people, but it's just not, it might not work necessarily for every single person, right? There might be other methods. There might be other things that we might not be considering because we're reviewing it, again, from our perspective, is just, like, because just how, like, I guess how popularized the concept of therapy has kind of become this day and age, that this is, like, oh, this is, like, the best possible thing there is. And again, I don't want to demean it by any means, because it is beneficial, because I have found it beneficial myself, but I can understand it being not the ultimate solution for everything dealing with your mental health, right? And so those are kind of my feelings that I got from this show, and I think that those are some excellent topics of discussion. And it is also, and again, there is, like, cultural things that you need to consider as well. With, like, therapy is not this concept of, like, talk therapy is not, like, something that, I like other cultures necessarily might have, right? Like Eastern, philosophy and other philosophies outside of those that are kind of derived from German and, like, European types of, modern philosophy. It's just different, right? There's other forms out there, and other ways to kind of deal with these things, and it's not like a catch-all, really. That I've been talking in circles a bit now, but hopefully you understand where I'm coming from when I'm discussing these things. Anyways, I've been talking a while about the show and everything. Excellent show, highly recommend it. I feel like if you are someone who is also, like, Asian American, or someone who is, a child of, like, an immigrant or someone, and you don't feel like you fully belong in, like, a, type of society, I think there are some messages in this show that I think can potentially resonate with you, in regards to trying to fit in with, American, in this sense, like, American society and American ideals and everything like that. I think there's that messaging in it as well. So yeah, highly recommend it. I think it's awesome that it's been getting a lot of praise and a lot of accolades and everything like that. So super dope. Yeah, I think that's going to be it for now. Damn, I've been recording for a while. I'm going to try to do another recording later during the week, maybe next weekend, talk more things, maybe basketball, whatever, how I feel. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about the show because I had a lot of thoughts on it, obviously. And so, yeah, I will catch up later this weekend. Alright, it's now January 20th, recording this on a Saturday afternoon after having a little bit of lunch. Nice little lunch. It's been raining quite a bit. We're expecting more rain this weekend, so I've been pretty low-key in terms of things that I've been able to do and things that I have done. So, it's been relatively quiet for the most part. I want to know, or I rather want to kind of acknowledge this past week the passing of Dejan or Deki Milejevic. He was the Warriors assistant coach. Just an incredibly sad moment for everyone involved. Obviously his family, the Warriors, and the league. Just a really tough situation. I hope that his family is healing and taking the time to recover, and hopefully they have gotten the support that they deserve, because it's really awful. It's really tough. Just really sad in general. And I don't know, I feel looking back on, if I ever look back on these recordings or whatever, and I'm only talking about just complaining about just Warriors stuff, I feel like it would be unfair not to mention these kinds of things that occur. It seemed like he was a very influential person within the sphere of Serbian basketball. I wish that I was a bit more familiar with his accolades and who he was as a person before his passing, but now that a lot of these, a lot of the things, his accomplishments and his kind of personal connections have sort of come more to the forefront, I think that really highlights his impact that he's had as a person on, players, obviously, on the Warriors, but also around the league, people like Jokic and other Serbian players. I think that kind of speaks a lot, and I'm sure that it's probably felt a lot more heavily with people who were close to him, and I'm sure it's just a really sad situation, and I hope that whoever's been impacted able to recover. Warriors games have been postponed for this past week, so I don't have much to kind of talk about in that regard. So I just wanted to make note of that before kind of delving into the rest of the nonsense that really doesn't matter as much. Pivoting from that, as kind of awkwardly, I suppose, but so this past week the Pacers made a very big trade for Pascal Siakam, involving Bruce Brown, Jordan Nora, and some first round picks, I believe. And so the Pacers now have Siakam, which is a pretty big haul. I think that can be I think that could be a pretty formidable team in the East. They could definitely push themselves to be quite I don't know if they would get to this status of a contender like Boston or Milwaukee or Philly, but I think that they can kind of cement themselves in sort of that middle group among the Cavs currently, the Knicks, the Heat, kind of that second tier group of Eastern teams, playoff teams. I think that, I don't know, it seems like a pretty good fit in sort of just as an eye test sort of thing. They lost their first game, but they were on a back-to-back, so I'll give them a little bit of, a little bit of grace in that sense. But, seems like a pretty good team. It's going to be interesting to see how they, how they look moving forward, how they sort of function as a team, and, how well the fit is for Siakam. But should be interesting, man. First big trade of the NBA season, before trade deadline, which is coming up in less than a month. So, I'm very interested in seeing how things go. Obviously, I'm, interested in seeing how the Warriors handle things on their end. First domino falls. We'll see what else comes next. Another name that's sort of been hinted kind of heavily is DeJounte Murray, which is really funny because, he hit 2 back-to-back game winners within the past couple of days. And it's like, okay, people are obviously joking. It's like, oh, he's raising his trade value. Yesterday's price is not today's price. I saw that comment. That made me laugh. He's another player that's been kind of heavily rumored to be in trade talks, so it'll be interesting to see where he goes, or if he even goes anywhere, if he stays, if the Hawks want to keep him, if they want to just kind of keep riding it. I feel that the last 2 games are a bit fluky. I don't think it's indicative of their season turning around necessarily. There's just been too many pitfalls this past year for the Hawks to really, I don't know. I feel like they need a significant change in order to kind of turn the tide. I don't necessarily know if DeJounte Murray is going to be the answer for that. So we'll see. Some interesting things going around the league in terms of trades and whatnot. Haven't really caught up with too many games recently. Switching over a little bit to football. Yes, this is now, you might not be aware, but this is actually now the premier NFL playoff talking podcast. I don't know why I said talking. The premier NFL primetime podcast. I know everything. I know the X's and O's. I know what the quarterback calls when he says, hut, and all the, calling out plays and all that, and wide receiver routes and defensive, defensive cornerbacks. I know these positions, and I know how the game works to a T. So don't question my knowledge. Playoffs are this weekend. I'm interested in seeing how. I'm interested. There seems to be some interesting storylines going around. Some newer players. The rookie quarterback CJ Stroud. I know him. This is the one thing I'm very happy about. So, I was in a fantasy league with my coworkers, and he's a rookie quarterback, right? So there's nothing to go off of his play other than his college career, I guess. But that's kind of difficult to translate into the league, I'm assuming. I added him as a backup quarterback on my fantasy team, and when Kirk Cousins went down, he became my starting quarterback, and I fucking nailed it because he killed it for the rest of the season. He was excellent, especially for that 1 week where he popped off. I forgot to do something crazy, 5 touchdowns or something, I don't know, but he went crazy. I absolutely killed it that week. That will forever live on in my memory. It's me doing pretty well 1 week. I ended up, finishing in the middle of the fantasy standings, but I'm happy of my choice of CJ Stroud. I had no idea who he was. No, that's not true. I knew exactly who he was. That's why I added him to my fantasy team. I expected all of this to happen. I expected him to lead the Texans to their, to this playoff run position. So, I totally expected that. But it seems like a kind of interesting storyline going on. I know the Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year. Patrick Mahomes, the big guy. He's more of a seasoned quarterback as opposed to CJ Stroud, who is, very much in his first year. So it'll be interesting if the Texans are able to, put up a test of sorts. That's the only storyline that I'm really aware of with that game. But that's coming up. And I'm going to check it out. And see how it goes. There's another game later today with the Niners and the Packers. I know the expectation is that the Niners are going to win, but you cannot count your eggs before they hatch, right? Or you can't count your chickens before they hatch. As someone who is, semi-fan, I guess, I kind of am kind of interested in rooting for the Niners. It'll be cool to see. Packers seem to be more of the underdog. So they are playing in, not exactly in San Francisco, but they're playing at the San Francisco or the Niners, home stand. So they have that advantage as well. So you'll be interested in see how that goes. Tomorrow, what is it? Detroit and I should know this. Detroit and the Buccaneers. So Tampa Bay. I watched the Tampa Bay versus the Philadelphia game last week, and that was sort of like an upset by Tampa Bay. Apparently, Philadelphia has been underperforming for the entire year. They were just talking about that nonstop during the podcast. I know Philly went to the Super Bowl last year, but it seems like they just completely crapped the bed this year and during the playoffs. So kind of a little upset there. And then the Lions I talked about earlier, this week, which I want to touch on a little bit in a little bit. I have some more things that I want to talk about. And then the other game, which is the Ravens and what's the other team? The Ravens and the Bills? No. Oh God, I think I might have it mixed up. Hold on, let me look it up. Let me just give me a second. Let me look it up. Anyways, what I wanted to say about the Niners. Sorry, I got it wrong. It's the Chiefs and the Bills that are playing tomorrow. And then it's the Ravens and the Texans tonight. I think that's what it is. My thing is not loading. Okay, that's fine. Anyways. Doesn't really matter. What did I want to say? What I wanted to say about kind of the Lions thing, there's another thing that I didn't even consider, which is sort of short-sighted of me. Was in regards to a team's success impacting the community of fans and whatnot. One thing that I didn't think about or really consider is the economic impact of success, the economic impact of bringing in fans to businesses, to restaurants, more people, I guess sort of, just coming together in public spaces. That's good for business. That's good for local businesses. That's good for just commerce and shit like that, right? So that's something that I didn't really even consider. I think that obviously you don't want. There's sort of obviously pros and cons to this. The con is that you don't necessarily want to rely on this single entity like the Lions, like your team, to you don't want to ride on that success too heavily, to be dependent on it in order to kind of thrive as a city or as a community. I think that could be detrimental if you don't have other things that you can rely on. But if you have enough infrastructure of sorts, support systems, whatever, there is like a way that you can kind of use this success to benefit the people in it, the people that are, a part of the city, and that sort of thing. So I think that there are definitely ways in which having a very strong sense of commodity, sense of connection based on sports, whatever, to be beneficial overall, but and then kind of like raise, not only raise the spirits of the people in the city, but also just provide a bit of an economic boost as well. So I think it's good. I think the ideal sense, just to reiterate, is to not be dependent on that, but to use that as sort of like a springboard to continue to develop and continue to grow. Hopefully for I guess any businesses that are within like Detroit or whatever, and for the people in general to grow and thrive and whatnot. So still cool to see. I also want to note that again. What did I want to talk about? When I noted on my phone, I put on my schedule, I put Xenoblade and culture. I was like, why did I put that? It was just like that one quest. Culture and Xenoblade, that one quest. That's what I put down. I know what I'm talking about. I'm pretty sure I've talked about this before. I don't know. Was this also like in relation to what was this even like in relation to? I don't even remember. I think it was about beef a little bit. I think I was like talking about beef, and then I was like, oh yeah, that reminds me of Xenoblade. Because of course everything reminds me of Xenoblade. I don't remember what it was exactly. There was like a point that I wanted to make, but it wasn't very clear, and now I don't remember exactly what I wanted to say. I think it was something about how there's like certain customs, there's like certain cultural things that you, as a person, as a part of that culture, may find it no longer reasonable or like necessary to partake in, but other members of your community continue to do so because it has been so deep-seated and deep-rooted within that culture, but it is often maybe more harmful and more maybe just harmful, or you could maybe say I don't know, problematic or whatever. So you as a person want to kind of let that go, and I forgot exactly what my point was in relation to to beef exactly. I mean, I was like talking about like the cultural sort of pressures within Asian communities from like Asian parents, or rather I was thinking about it and I didn't really like voice it. The pressure that Asian parents place on their children to be their sort of successor, to be successful in career ventures, educational ventures, whatever, and that their success, their child's success, is reflected on them, and if they don't succeed, they sort of take it on and internalize it, right? This idea for like immigrants, in order for them to be successful, their child needs to live up to their standards, that kind of thing, right? Pretty well talked about in media. It's not super like novel at this point. I think that within Beef, there's kind of that conversation where Danny is much more, and I might be just treading the same ground again, but Danny was like trying to kind of uphold the vision that his parents had for him and his brother, but he he was trying his best to kind of do these things and do the best that he could at sort of this vision of just do the most he could to build himself up, essentially, to be held in high regard by his parents or whatnot. I think that there's a part of it where it's like I think within the Western world, especially here in the States, versus culturally, in Eastern Asia, like Korea, Japan, China, there is this very clear divide in terms of like over here it's like independence. As when you grow up, the expectation is that you essentially move out, you kind of build your own life and your own family. This is very generalized, by the way. This is very, very generalized. I'm not even really. It's not very nuanced of an outlook. Just want to make that clear. And then more Eastern Asian countries where it's like you sort of keep things within the family, you build with the family. Again, your success is also your parents' success, right? There's sort of this sense of camaraderie, sense of kind of like, you build things, quote unquote, together. I think there are two extremes of that. One is where it's like uber independence, to the point where you're essentially isolating yourself. You're so independent that you don't have anybody, right? And you only kind of keep things to yourself. Your success is your own success. You don't even really, you're not willing to give any sense of like, praise or whatever to anybody else around you. Like it is purely your own. While in, and then the other extreme of that is where you sort of give up your own autonomy to a certain cause or a certain group or whatever, right? And I feel like that's there's senses of that where it's detrimental in both cases, both extreme cases, which comes from just kind of this cultural background and sort of this deep-seated nature of how you build yourself up and how you sort of go about living your life. And some of it is pressure that you feel from your family, extended family, whatever. And you, as someone who is a part of that, feels like you need to continue to do the same things that your others in the past have done in order to just kind of uphold that sense of culture. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, we've done these things for so long. I feel that you should do the same things as we have to essentially continue to exist as a part of this culture. You know what I mean? And I think that can be damaging to the individual. It can also be damaging to just that community in general, because you have people who feel pressured to perform in a certain way to, essentially fit into a box, whatever. And if they don't fit those standards, then they're kind of like ostracized. So it's like, okay, they're not a part of your vision. They're not a part of your culture because they don't belong. And I think that's detrimental. It is difficult for cultural norms to shift overnight. But I'm glad that there are these conversations that are being had where it's like, you don't have to adhere to these past notions simply because they are what's expected. You know what I mean? I think that I think that there are ways to, essentially, like, take pieces of it and still respect where things have originated from, and understand the history behind why this is sort of the way things were. But I think it just might not make sense in the modern age to live your life like that. You know what I mean? And excuse me. And I think the reason why I was thinking of that Xenoblade quest, it's a very clear, the argument in that quest is very, like, it is a very clear argument. Like, essentially what it is, there's a trial that one of, like, the NPCs has to undergo. Like, he essentially has to go somewhere super dangerous, and there's like a little ritual or something like that. And it's like, okay, at this point, it is sort of nonsensical to do something like that, because your survival is far more important than whatever ritual that we had in the past. Like, it is more important for you to continue to live, as opposed to, like, essentially appease, these cultural norms, right? And so I think that type of argument is sort of, I think, present in things, in mediums, and in stories like Beef, where it's like, you don't have to follow this traditional path that has been set forth for you. I think that, and you don't also have to go the complete opposite way. Like, you don't have to, like, abandon it either, right? You can acknowledge it, you can still be a part of it, but I just think there are some things where you don't have to carry it forward with you, because it's damaging to you as a person. It's damaging the people around you. So I think that there are ways to acknowledge, again, there's a way to acknowledge, cultural things without fully abandoning it either. You know what I mean? So I think that was sort of the point that I wanted to make in regards to why I put Xenoblade in culture and connecting it back to something like Beef. So that was sort of my spiel. Thank you for listening. Anyways, that was kind of that was really all that I wanted to address there. So this past week, another thing, I've gone back into triangle strategy, which is wild, because I hadn't touched that game in 2 years, basically. I got stuck on a level, and I came back to it, and I finally got past that level, and I was like, okay, all right, I'm back. I think I'm, like, back in. I'm re-familiarized myself with the story, the characters, that sort of thing. And I was kind of back in. I think, I noted that I wanted to play, like, maybe either Disco Elysium or Okami. But I don't know, there's, like, a part of me that I was sort of craving a bit of that strategy RPG kind of feel that I got from 13 Sentinels. And I guess, in triangle strategy, it's a bit more extensive. There's a bit more strategy involved. So I was kind of craving that a little bit, and I wanted a little bit more of that. And I realized that I still had that game, and I hadn't beaten it. So, yeah, I went back to it, and I've been playing it for the past week, and it's been fun, man. It's good. The game does a lot of interesting things. There's I feel like there are multiple endings. I'm not entirely sure about that. Like, I don't know why there wouldn't be, just considering, like, the different branches of paths that you can take, but I anticipate there being different endings for this game. There's essentially, like, a decision tree, and how you sort of proceed, how you interact with the characters dictate which path you're going to kind of follow. And I think that's pretty cool. The sort of the chronology of events, it reminds me a little bit of Radiant Historia on the DS, and I know they released it for the 3DS as well, like a special edition. That game involved more like time travel stuff, so you could like, you know, travel back and forth between like different like timelines and stuff, which is pretty cool. But that game also had multiple endings, and so that kind of reminded me of this a little bit. But I really like the music. I don't know if I noted this in the past, but the music is excellent. There's some really fantastic tracks in this game. And I think one of the more intriguing things, the characters themselves are okay. I think the focus more is more about the sort of the political aspect of the game. I think it handles it pretty well. It really doesn't show things. I mean, there are some aspects where it's like clearly obvious that these characters are like evil and have ulterior motives or whatever. But for, you know, in a general sense, there's a lot of gray. There's a lot of like, it's like you gain the support of this one nation, but it's clear that they have a lot of like, you know, skeletons in their closet, right? But in order for your kingdom to survive, you need their support, right? And so there's a lot of like, ooh, how should we proceed? There's no clear, you know, there's almost like no way to like get away from, you know, there's no way not to spill some blood in this game. I think that's very cool. I think it's very like, there's no, again, this is not a game where it's like this, it's like this is like evil and they got da-da-da. Like there's more nuance to it, character motivations, and just sort of the, you know, it's not, everything is not clear, set in stone. It's not black and white. And I think that's really cool, and that's something that I appreciate. One of the, you know, major things that I kind of appreciate about this game. And it handles it pretty well. And the combat is pretty fun too. I was frustrated at that one level. That level still pissed me off, but we got past it, and now we can kind of move on. I have no idea how much longer I have in this game, but I'm gonna finish it, man. I'm gonna finish it. Like I've mentioned in the past, most games I will finish. It is just, there's just certain ones that I just don't like. There's only a few that I haven't really like completed, but most games I will finish because I'm prideful about that kind of thing, and I feel there's just like things that are left undone, and I don't really like that feeling. So yeah, I'm gonna finish this game, and then I'll see how I feel, and then we'll move on to something else. But I'm enjoying my time with Triangle Strategy at this point. So that's it. A lot of things that I kind of wanted to cover. And I guess, yeah, we'll see, man. We'll see how things go. Probably will be staying indoors most of the time while it continues to rain, but it will give me a chance to watch some football. Wow. When have I said that before? So yeah, that's going to be it for this week's episode. Thanks for listening. This has been Save the Semantics, signing off.